lost private. We're in Normandy.
Thanks for checking in here at the We're Not Lost Private podcast. We appreciate all your support. But do you know how else you can support us? By signing up at Patreon. For $3 a month, you'll have access to all of our episodes, plus access to all kinds of bonus material, like our quarterly newsletter, photographs, and official paperwork, and research that goes into each and every show. You can follow the pod on a multitude of platforms such as YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, pretty much anywhere you catch your pods. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 52 of the We're Not Lost Private podcast. And I'm so very pleased to welcome our next guest. Clare Mulley is joining us. She is an author of much renown, writing about women's roles during World War II. She has released The Women Who Flew for Hitler, The Spy Who Loved, The Woman Who Saved the Children, and her most recent book, which is receiving much acclaim, Agent Zoe. You may have seen Clare. There it is. You may have seen Clare in any one of a number of historical festivals in the UK, including the We Have Ways Fest, where she's been featured prominently for at least 2 years. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, I think I've done 3 or more. I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
A lot.
But most recently, the World War II Museum's International Conference on World War II, where she was one of the keynote speakers early on and then took part in 2 panels on OSS, SOE, and Jedburghs and special agents with Benjamin Jones and Bradley Hart. And was most recently honored by the Polish government and the Polish Foreign Ministry specifically for their best history book for 2024-2025. Clare, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. I think we like we spoke about before we went on the air, I think we should just get right into it. And maybe a little bit of background on Agent Zoe before we kind of look at her wartime activities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well,
sorry,
I'm not sure what you want me to say.
Yeah, I mean, just a little bit of historical background before the war starts in September of 39.
Well, she was born in 1909 in a city called Torun, beautiful garrison town, very ancient in northwest Poland. But in fact, because she was born in 1909, that was when Poland had been annexed and occupied by its aggressive neighbours and divided up. Poland has this long history of centuries of being divided up by its aggressive neighbours, but also centuries of resistance and defiance and restitution as well. And when she was born, that part of Poland was part of the Prussian Empire, so that's an earlier German empire. So ironically, I mean, legally, she was actually born Prussian German, but she always knew that inside she was a Pole. Her family were deeply patriotic, as so many Poles were in that region, and they passed down from generation to generation this knowledge that they were Polish and that one day they might be called on to fight for their nation's freedom. But her first language was German. And even her name is Elzbieta Zawacka. And but when she was born in public, she had to be called Lisa or Liesel, which is the German version of Elzbieta, which is, of course, Elizabeth in English. So it's ironic, really, that the Germans unwittingly didn't realise, but they're actually training a perfect agent to serve against them, because here's someone, she's got burning patriotic desire to restore her homeland. She speaks fluent German, the enemy's language. She's never going to get tripped up on a German custom or tradition. And since knee high, she's learnt to have a double identity as well. So she is set to go.
Yeah, that point you made about not being tripped up by a custom or language and linguistics, that'll end up benefiting her later on when she's in London and she's dealing with another Polish agent. That I'm sure that's a pretty fun anecdote to recount. So we'll get to that, though. But I mean, in September of 39, the invasion of Poland, like you said, they basically have created the perfect spy.
Yeah, well, I mean, so we've jumped from 1909, her being born in her early childhood, to September 1939. And there's a big thing to mention in the middle, which is the end of the First World War. So at that point, Poland is actually restored to the map of Europe. And so she becomes Polish, and she's determined to serve for the freedom of her country should it ever be threatened again. And she joins the Women's Military Auxiliary. So they're not officially part of the Polish army, a bit like in Britain. Women women couldn't bear arms in the British or the Polish armed forces. So she's in the closest thing, which is a very highly trained. She knows how to use weapons. She knows how to drive military vehicles. She can do military medicine. She can use explosives, and she's uniformed. So on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invades Poland from the west, the start of the Second World War, she immediately has orders to undertake, and she steps into action with her female unit. They're sent across Poland to the defense of a city in what was then eastern Poland, a city called Lvov, which is now Lviv in Ukraine. And she is sent to defend that city. And then, of course, just 17 days later, on the 17th of September, Poland is invaded again by a different enemy. This time they're invaded from the east by the Soviet Red Army, so the Russian Red Armed Forces. And they say they're only there to protect the ethnic Russian population, something we have heard again quite recently. But in fact, we now know that there was an agreement, a secret protocol between Hitler and Stalin before the war, that they would divide up Poland between them. So Poland now faced invasion on two fronts, and they knew they couldn't continue to fight on effectively on two fronts. So they never actually capitulated ever. They kept fighting on, but they took the strategic military decision to pull out their armed forces and their government and their treasury and the first Enigma code breakers, and they got them all out through Lvov, which is where Zoe is serving. So she's serving in the defence of, creating the barricades, producing petrol bombs to defend that exodus going out through Romania to regroup in France, where the Polish army continued to serve the Allies.
Yeah, so her nationalism has been weaponized at this point, and on top of it, as we go through her career, we're going to see that her performance pushes back on those societal norms that you were talking about, the limitations placed on women in the armed forces, the Polish armed forces. I mean, she's gonna push back on those, whether knowingly or unknowingly.
She's one of many thousands of women who decide that they are going to serve in the defense of their nation and pledge themselves to the Polish resistance.
Now, at some point during this time, when the Poles pull back all of their key institutions to London, she remains, though, on the battlefield, but now she's essentially a spy at this point, correct?
She is serving without uniform. That doesn't make her a spy. Sort of special agent work, really. So she immediately joins the clandestine resistance that sets up lots of different fledgling groups across the country that are finally pulled together to become the AK, which is the Polish Home Army, as opposed to their armed forces overseas. So the Home Army is the Polish resistance. And so she joins that very early on, gets back to Warsaw, and she does work in intelligence. Yes, she volunteers to set up an intelligence gathering network. So she recruits 200, all women actually, within a month, across Silesia, which is a very strategically important area near the German border. But it's an area the size of Wales. I'm not sure if that helps your American listeners. Sorry, it's a big region and strategically important. And they are gathering information on the movement of military freight, troop movements, and so on. How the German occupying authorities are organising in the first country that they've occupied, all of which is, hugely of interest to the Allies.
Yeah, as you noted, it's a huge swath of territory, and the Germans can't be everywhere at once. So she's able to operate for quite a bit of time, and setting up intelligence networks is not an easy endeavor.
No, it's very highly organized. So it's the women she recruits are working in cells of 5. If there's a breach, if there's a security breach, they won't, even under brutal interrogation, they won't be able to betray each other because there's only one link between them, and that's Zoe. And she recruits women who are working, very closely with the enemy forces in a sense, because they're often women who are working in the occupying authorities, so the Nazi Germans, admin offices and military canteens, all of that sort of thing. So they're perhaps secretaries or translators, but secretly, or office cleaners, secretly they are overhearing the conversations. They're looking at the maps and the pins moving across them on the walls, looking at the papers on the desks. She recruits people who work in the telephone exchange and the post office to steam open letters and overhear telephone conversations and so on. And all of them are noting exactly what future German plans are, where the military is being placed and so on. So this is vital information. And of course, they're moving this weekly sets of statistics around is one of the most dangerous roles in the resistance at that point in the war. And so Zoe puts her hand up and volunteers to take that information herself. And initially, she's just taking it from the region that she's organising, which is Silesia, taking that information to the Home Army headquarters in Warsaw. But pretty soon, I mean, it's not without risk. Women have some advantage in doing this work. It was mostly women who served as couriers for intelligence and who served as messengers early on. And in fact, the early resistance couldn't have operated without these women because that was how they communicated. But they pick the women because any able-bodied man, particularly of conscription age, of course, is either already a prisoner of war or dead, or very, very suspect to the German authorities. Whereas women, of course, are moving around territory the whole time, looking after businesses, looking after families, and so on. So they kind of operate a bit under the radar. The Germans are very misogynistic. They don't think women can have the nous or the strategic understanding or the courage to do any significant work. They are basically overlooked and underestimated. But when the Germans find out what some of these women like Zoe are doing, the old ladies on the trams or the pretty young girls with lipstick in the bars that might be getting a bit of information out of them, when they begin to realise their response is very, very brutal. So it carries the same fundamental risks as any of the work that the men are undertaking.
And as you stated, one of the intelligence is only as good as what's reported up and out. So it's got to be difficult. As you said, she takes intelligence back to Warsaw. But I remember reading about one particular mission where she actually goes into the belly of the beast with information.
Yeah.
And to me, this is I used this word in my last podcast with Chuck Hetrick. Herrick, when we were talking about the DD tanks on Omaha. I find them terrifying. The idea of getting in one of those tanks with the screens on it and expecting it to float. This is also terrifying to me, where you're literally carrying the evidence in hand in some capacity, and you are going into the belly of the beast.
Yeah, so this, you're absolutely right. I mean, I never in a million years would I do this, but because she speaks fluent German, she has extra skills that are very useful to the resistance, that of course many Poles don't have. So after the fall of France, they used to use a land courier route to take this information out west to the Allies, into Angers, where the Polish government in exile was. And then after the fall of France, that the Polish government and the armed forces headquarters all moved to Britain, to London. So now they need to get information to London. And some of this is time sensitive information. I mean, of course, they send by wireless whatever they can, which is a lot, but they can't send maps. They can't send original documents that need to be forged. They can't send any information that's too sensitive that the Germans might overhear. So they have this very efficient land courier route system that Zoe is working on. And after the fall of France, they find the fastest way to get information to London is actually to go into the heart of the Third Reich itself, to go into Berlin, the Nazi capital. I mean, it's just horrific. And of course they need someone who speaks German, and Zoe fits the bill. And of course she's blonde and blue-eyed, which helps. I know not all Germans, of course, are blonde and blue-eyed, but it certainly helped her to kind of fit that stereotype that they, were less likely to pick her up and question her. And she is scared because it is terrifying, like you say. So, and she's got a bit of a tell. When she gets nervous, she gets flustered. She gets a bit sweaty. She says to her friend, sometimes I was sweating like a mouse, which I love. It turns out it's a Polish phrase, but I love this image of her kind of cowering, and her face goes red. All the blood rushes to her face. So she's undertaking terrifying work, and she's incredibly close to capture on so many times. There's one occasion she's nearly caught with some money early on a train. She manages to tie up some string and shove it down the pipe work behind a vent in the toilet on a train, and then goes back to her seat. But she's quite flustered, and they take her off for further checks, and she just has to keep her cool, and her she's so quick thinking On that occasion, she smudged her fingerprint. She waited till she was the last person to be fingerprinted and then smudged it, and they couldn't be bothered to get the ink pad out again and so on. And she got away with it. I mean, that's sort of, you turn on a hairpin and that saves her life.
Yeah, that's
And
absolutely
it's full
brilliant.
of stories like that.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant that she had the bless you, that she
Thank
had
you.
the wherewithal and the quick thinking, as you stated, to do that.
Yeah.
How many people under pressure would be that nimble of thought to
Yeah.
readdress yourself to the task? I mean, most of
Yeah.
us just we get nervous when you get pulled over by a policeman, even if you didn't do anything wrong. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. You start doubting yourself, don't you? And she doesn't, she can't let herself do that. So, and she is, you know, she's not fearless. She is nervous. She's very anxious. She knows what the very real threats are. She loses many friends during the war. And in fact, her entire family are arrested during the Second World War. I should say that quite a few of them do survive the war. But she doesn't know that. You know, her cousin is sent to Auschwitz. He actually manages to break out of Auschwitz. Extraordinary story. Her sister, her younger sister, who she adores, who she herself has recruited into the resistance, she is caught and sent to Ravensbrück. And incredibly, she survives that. And eventually, the two sisters are reunited later on. I mean, it's extraordinary. But so Zoe knows what the very real risks are, but she keeps serving. She keeps fighting anyhow. And as you say, she's so imaginative. She's so sharp and quick-witted and so strong that she manages, and lucky, I should say, that she manages to make it through.
yeah, I mean, true courage is the ability to continue the mission despite being scared. It's not really,
Exactly right.
a foolish courage where you're just, bolting on in.
Yeah, blasé. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to master your fear and continue the mission is the, is courage in itself. And I think she's obviously demonstrating that.
Yeah,
But she can only stay in the field so long, right? I mean, the Germans are very good at penetrating resistance networks,
yeah,
and we
yeah.
see
And
that in
there are,
France for sure.
and the same thing in Poland. I mean, their interrogations are very brutal, and her network is. I mean, I wouldn't use the word betrayed, but they capture people and then they torture them, and that includes, you know, using electric wires attached to sensitive parts of the body. I mean, it's just absolutely horrific. Throwing people out of buildings, you know. So there are information leaks, of course, and eventually the Gestapo do have Zoe's name and her photograph, so they know exactly who she is. And there's this awful moment where she realizes she's finally being followed, and she spends a day. It's a very dramatic day. I can't do the whole story now, but she dashes between different police cities by tram and by train, and tries to go in buildings one side and come out with a scarf on her, does the whole thing like a movie. And eventually she thinks she's made it. She gets the last train, the night express train from Krakow to Warsaw. And she sets down in a carriage and thinks, finally, I've done it. And then the carriage door opens and this man she recognizes now, who's been following her, sits opposite her. And she just thinks, I mean, of all her fears, her greatest fear is that she might be arrested and forced to betray her colleagues, her friends. So she thinks, I'll have to take my life. There's nothing. But she sees it's a night train. He seems to go to sleep at one point. So she slips her shoes off, opens the carriage door and pads down the corridor, just wondering what she can do, hide somewhere or what. And then she realizes that he's watching her. He's leaning out of the carriage door and watching. And as she looks out the window, she just sees telegraph poles whizzing past. The train is an express. It's not slowing down. It's not going to stop anywhere before they get to Warsaw. And she just thinks, I have to go for it. And so as she passes the passenger door, she suddenly lunges forward, opens the door, and throws herself out of this moving train. And I just, oh my God. But she makes it. She doesn't smash her head open. She doesn't roll underneath the very heavy metal reels, the powering behind her, the carriages behind. And above all, she isn't caught and she isn't, forced to betray anyone. And she keeps on. She keeps on with her mission.
Yeah, she's
Amazing.
again, we talked about that quick thought, the ability to overcome your fear, her ability to utilize her quick wit to get out
Hmm.
of situations, and provide her the space she needs to continue her decision-making cycle
That's
is
right. She's
very,
razor sharp.
yeah, very interesting to see that. I mean, people who are that nimble of thought are very dangerous people. They can be very dangerous people.
Yeah, you
Uh,
definitely want them on your side, that's for
yeah,
sure.
and she just, yeah, these stories just continue to amaze me. Her ability to work her way through the problem, constantly problem solving and thinking one step ahead, which is the key to a lot of this. And she has the ability to do that, whether conscious or not, or subconsciously. She's always staying one step ahead.
Yeah.
And that allows her to make her way out, right? In February 43, is she's
right.
ordered to London, or is she on her
She
own
is,
volition?
yeah. Yeah, no, she's ordered. So the commander of the Polish Home Army at this point is Stefan Grot-Rowecki. Grot is his code name. It means arrowhead in Polish. And he actually sends out 4 couriers to get to London with the same information. So it's 2 very important microfilm, one of which he's got hidden in the shaft of a key. The other one's in a little brass cigarette lighter, quite a cute little toy. You could light your cigarette and not burn the microfilm inside. It was quite good. So fictional, isn't it? But it's all in the files, believe me. And he sends out 3 men and Zoe, but he appoints Zoe also to be his personal representative. So Zoe is Elzbieta's nom de guerre. And she is sent out. I think she's the only woman. She's the only one I found who is appointed as an emissary of a commander of an allied army. So his representative, with 2 missions to undertake in London. So that basically means she has to cross from Warsaw to London. That's nearly 1,000 miles of enemy occupied territory. And yeah, I mean, it's a chapter that I love to write because I know she makes it, but it doesn't seem possible that she can. She's variously thrown out of a hotel window. She has to hide in the water tender of a train, is nearly drowned when they take on more water for their journey.
Goodness.
She is shot at in the mountain passes of the Pyrenees. I mean, it's just insane. But she is the only one of the 4 sent out to get to London and not to lose her microfilm. And then she has to undertake 2 missions in London.
And not to spoil anything from the book, but did the Polish government provide her with any support going on this journey?
Not a lot, no. I mean, a little bit. When she gets to Spain, there's a little bit of support. So she is told to report with a certain code phrase and number and so on. And then she is provided with some from Spain is neutral, although they are sympathetic to the Nazi Germans. It's Franco's regime, of course. So she does get support when she reaches there. She gets to Gibraltar, and then she takes an Allied troop ship from Gibraltar to Liverpool, arrives on May Day 1943. But yeah, I mean, most of the journey through occupied territory, she is just doing off her own bat. Yeah, a little bit of help from the French resistance in France.
But for the most part, from Warsaw to Spain, you're on your own. Use your guile, use your natural abilities, and get yourself there.
That's right. Yeah.
Again, just you're out on your own. You're like, go ahead, do this. You can handle it. It's no problem.
Yeah.
And
she does. Yeah. Amazing.
So she gets there. She takes a boat to Liverpool, and she's met by MI6 representatives. Is that correct? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, taken down to London. So, I mean, this is not unusual. Anyone arriving from occupied territory obviously could be a source of really useful intelligence, just from their own observations and so on. And the Poles have radioed ahead, say Zoe is coming, so they know to expect her. But yeah, so they collect her, and she's actually quite insulted. I mean, because when she's in Britain, we've got all of her papers in the National Archives here, and rather fantastic, the first paper in that folder is her interrogation report. And the interrogating officer says, she was rather reluctant to give information to me. It's such a shame, because she wants to work with the British. Of course, we're allies in this war together. But she is a Pole, and the Polish government in exile is in London, and the first people she wants to give any information to is her comrade, her,
of course,
her own countrymen. So, so she doesn't talk to the Brits first. She keeps it all up, and she gives the information over to the Poles. But of course, then once they've gathered what they can, they share that information, and she is interrogated by the head of SOE. And when I say interrogated, this is not how the Germans do it. There are cups of tea over a desk. It's not dogs and a searchlight in your face.
Nowadays, we would call it a debriefing.
Yeah, okay. She's debriefed.
Yeah.
So, and they're so impressed by her, they actually recommend her for the OBE, so a very high British honour, which she actually never receives, but she's put forward for it at that point. And they talk about this intelligent and very brave woman. It's lovely to read it in the files. But she also has a bit of a hard time in Britain, both from the Brits and the Poles, who can't quite get their head around the fact of what this woman has done and what her missions are, and don't really accept her. They're only used to taking orders from men, of course. So
yeah. Now, Yeah, she's facing all those difficulties, but she ends up entering, I guess, the formal training pipeline for an agent. Is that correct, or is it something different than that?
Not really. So she debriefs. She undertakes her two missions. So they sort out inefficiencies in the courier route, and her second mission is to secure legal military status of women in the Home Army as soldiers
Mhm.
rather than as resistance fighters. Because the women, of course, are treated by the Nazis when they're caught. They're either just executed immediately under Hitler's commando order, or they are sent to be laboured to death or sent to an extermination camp. Whereas the men get protections under the Geneva Convention and go to prison of war camps. So the women don't have the same protections, even though they're doing a lot of the same roles. But nobody is going to agree to that. They don't really understand how it operates in occupied territory. None of the men in Britain have experienced that. They've experienced the open fight. They're very courageous officers, but it's a very different thing, a resistance war. And so she just drafts that military decree herself, that legal decree. And then she actually goes and helps train some of the Poles. So in Poland, they got 350,000 troops out at the start through Lviv at the very start of the war. And they cream off the top 2,000, say, around, and put them through special forces training. And they develop, most of them don't get through. It's incredibly rigorous, but they get an elite special forces para force, and they are to be sent back by parachute mostly into occupied Poland, but also into France. They serve some in Italy, Yugoslavia, and so on as well. And they are in Britain. They're known as the P section of SOE, the Special Operations Executive, which is like the American OSS. It was really sort of the precursor, really. The OSS, of course, went on to become the CIA. Anyhow, so they have this elite group, and she is sent to train them, not in, weapons or anything or communications, but in what to expect behind enemy lines, so that when they go in, they will know how to respond to different German uniforms on the street. They won't ask for food that's been rationed or just not available for 2 years, anything like that that would have meant they'd be picked up and arrested immediately. So she trains the guys, and then the Poles say, thank you very much. Service has been brilliant. Where would you like to spend the rest of the war? We can maybe get you a flat in Scotland, where a lot of the Polish forces are based at that point, or in London. And she's like, what are you talking about? I've got to go back and serve my country, and I'm not finished. And they said, well, that's very noble, but I'm afraid there's no way you can get back. There's only one way to go back, and that's to parachute. And obviously, you're a lady. So basically, she says, get me a pair of trousers, come on. And she becomes the only woman to complete the parachute training course of this elite group. They're called the Chico Chimney, which is sort of like the silent unseen, or shadowy and unseen sort of thing. And she's the only woman she's the only female member of this elite Polish special force, and the only woman to parachute back from Britain behind enemy lines into occupied Poland.
Now, just to back up, when she was training the male agents or the male commandos, did she work on them with any kind of clandestine tradecraft as well, or was it
No,
strictly?
she was specifically doing this training to recognize and to understand conditions in occupied territory. Because, I mean, a lot of these guys had no idea, and she said they wanted to pack a pistol down the back of their pants and shoot at anything behind a bush. And the first thing that's going to get you picked up is if you make an automatic move for a weapon, then everyone's going to know that you've got training. And so there's an awful lot of work to acclimatize people before they go out, so they won't immediately give themselves away. So that's specifically the role she was training them in.
Now, so when she jumps back into Poland, it's very interesting in her uniform. What
Yeah, yeah.
what she goes in with. You want to explain
Yeah, sure. I
that?
mean, she is the only person to parachute from Britain to Poland in a dress. I mean, obviously, she's got all the kit on top of that, so she's not only in a dress, okay? But it's important she wears a dress because she has to disappear as quickly as possible into the civilian population in Poland. And women in the 1940s in Poland tend not to be walking around in trousers, right? So this has military reason behind it. But of course, on top of that, she's got a cardigan, she's got an old Polish overcoat, everything Polish made, so of course it can't be traced. On top of that, she's got her parachute jumpsuit, so like overalls, which has got a belt full of gold coins to give to the resistance for funding, to buy weapons, to bribe people, and so on. She's got a torch, she's got a spade so that if necessary, she's blown off course, she can dig a hole, bury her parachute, and so on. And she's got 2 revolvers, which she said she was very proud of. And she's got a little tiny, tiny thing as well. She's got a cyanide pill, so a poison pill in case it all goes horribly wrong. So she's very well equipped.
Yeah. Now, does she immediately go about setting up her intelligence networks again when she gets into Poland?
There is intelligence work. There's all sorts of work, actually. Things have changed somewhat in the sort of, she's May till September, so sort of 6 months that she's been away. There have been all sorts of developments, other betrayals as well. But yes, she continues to support on some of the courier routes, but there is quite soon, unfortunately, a major betrayal, the largest one, and a lot of the women she's worked with are arrested. Her closest friend, Amelia Malessa, who runs this land route, also is not arrested. The 2 of them get away. And Zoe receives orders to disappear for a while because they need her as backup should everyone be taken. If Amelia's taken, she's the only other person that knows all of the contacts, all of the systems. So she's very, very valuable at this point. So she's sent to lie low at a convent. Actually, during my research, I saw this convent on the map. I was driving I started off at the DZ, the drop zone where she parachutes in. I was going to Warsaw with a very kind driver and guide and translator to go to the archives there. And we saw this convent on the map. So we stopped there on the way. And I was looking in through the gates, beautiful ornate gates. It was a palace once. It's still a convent today, lovely building. And a nun walked past and said, "Excuse me, this is private property," sort of thing in Polish. And my translator said, "I'm sorry, this woman, Clare Mulley, she's obsessed with the Second World War. I'll try and get her to move on." And she said, "Oh, Clare Mulley, we know her. One of my previous books that they'd read about a Polish woman." They said, "Oh, do you want to come in then?" And it was just fantastic because I met their oldest resident, Sister Yanina, who had worked with the nuns. She'd known them and who had hidden Zoe in the war. So there was this amazing, she got some papers, she'd got a lot of stories she could tell me, and no one had ever gone there before. So there was a lot of new information to put in the book. But eventually, yeah, well, it really was. Sometimes it feels like you're doing the right thing. And but eventually Zoe defied those orders. The only time she broke orders, and she thought it's time that she knew that her country was about to rise up in national defiance against the Germans and what became the Warsaw Uprising. She was determined to take part. She wasn't going to miss that. So she actually left the convent and went back and served again.
And again, they've already previously identified her. They have pictures. I mean, the danger level for her is ratcheted up well beyond what she experienced during her earlier time.
I mean, we're now she gets back in September 43. It's now spring of 44, going towards summer 44. And at this point, I mean, the Germans, everyone really must have known the tide of the war had turned at this point. In June 41, of course, Hitler betrayed Stalin and the German forces invaded Soviet-held territory. So Stalin joins the Allies. And they open up the Eastern Front. So there's now Germans are fighting on 2 fronts and they start pushing back through Europe from the east. And so they've got that. We've got at the end of December 1941, of course, America joins the war. So we've got the mass resources. These are fundamental watershed points, turning points in the war. So by 44, by the summer, June 44, we have D-Day. So we have British forces coming in the north, American forces coming in the south, and a mixture of other forces from other nations as well, I should say, coming in, pushing back through France. And the Germans are really on the back foot. They're being pushed down on the eastern front. They're being pushed from the west. And this is the point where the Poles decide to rise up and liberate their own capital city.
Yeah, you stole my thought. I was literally thinking Germans on the back foot at this point. I mean, the sweeping Allies sweeping through Brittany. They've launched through Caen. They're kind of closing, starting to close the Falaise pocket.
Italy is coming,
So Germany's on, being battered on 3 fronts essentially at this point. And I guess the decision. I'm not going to say it was an easy decision on their part, but this is the time to do it because the Germans are preoccupied in 3 different geographical areas.
Yeah, I mean it's very difficult, the Warsaw Uprising. Had they predicted how it went, things might have been different. But at this point, Poland has been under such a brutal occupation. I mean, the occupation of France is horrific, incredibly brutal. the occupation of Poland is that on steroids. Okay, the Germans. I mean, when Zoe came through Europe to get to Britain, she's astounded when she reaches Paris because she sees German officers walking around with guidebooks, going to see the sights like tourists. They get off the street, they get off the pavement and walk on the street to let a lady pass. You know, it's. I mean, don't get me wrong, they are still rounding up French female resistors, male resistors. It's all horrific. But there's the basic feeling that we're enemies, but we're all humans. In Poland, they treat the Poles, they call them Slavic people. They say that they are not fully human. They will shoot them on the street with no provocation at all. If you don't get off the pavement for a German in Warsaw, that's enough. Hans Frank, the Governor General of the central zone, German occupied zone of Warsaw, he said there aren't enough trees in the forests of Poland to make the paper to write the names of the people I will kill. It's horrific. So so the Polish people, as a result, they're desperate. You know, their resistance has been very strategic, very tightly to control, to bring information back to the West, to help with, you know, the invasion that's coming forward, to show where the troops are, where to, you know, it's their contribution to the intelligence war is great. But they don't want to just do that. They want to fight in the open fight. Yeah. And they've been told to wait, it's not time yet, wait, it's not time yet. And they're raring to serve. And so now they see the Germans on the back foot. They know that Allied forces are coming in from the West. Militarily, the Warsaw Uprising is against the German forces, and they think it will take just 2 days. They see these demoralized men coming back, terrible wounds, alcoholic, coming back from the Eastern Front. They think they can polish them off in 2 days, but they prepare to last for 2 weeks. And this is part of Zoe's role. She is prepared to supply the fighting front lines with medicine, with food, with water, and so on, everything they need. So militarily, it's against, and no one could have held them back at that point. I think you've got a dog straining at a leash, the leash breaks, that's it. You know, they are ready. But politically, it's against. It's an action to preserve Poland in the face of the oncoming Red Army. They know the Soviets want their territory. The Soviet Union had invaded Poland, as I said, on the 17th of September 1939. Of course, at that point, they arrested loads of people, loads of the Polish armed forces. The senior office class are never seen again. Turns out they're all murdered. And now that the Poles, you know, when Russia enters the war on the Allied side, they're told you have to be allies with them, which is pretty difficult. But they know at least they want to be able to liberate their own capital city, symbolic of the country, before the Russians arrive, so they can welcome them as equals and allies and not as, not be beholden to them for their liberation. So that's the plan. And it makes sense. But of course, Hitler is so insulted that these people rise up against him. He sees it as such an affront. And he is, they rise up, the Warsaw Uprising starts on the 1st of August. And on the 20th of December is the most famous attempt on Hitler's life. He is already livid. He is not prepared to take anything more. So he says, kill everyone, kill the soldiers, kill the civilians, kill the men, kill the women, kill the children. And there are districts of Warsaw where they did that. They just machine gunned people or threw in hand grenades and came in with flamethrowers. And the civilian death rate is massive. And it makes no military sense at all. The Germans fight on. Amazingly, the resistance keeps fighting for 2 months, 63 days. And eventually they are forced, because Hitler will not have them pull back. So they are forced to concede defeat eventually.
And no help coming from the Allies on top of it.
Well, the Allies try from the West. They're incredibly brave aircrew, pilots and aircrew that are coming in to deliver supplies, flying low into the teeth of machine gun on, the enemy's positions on the tops of buildings, dropping containers with weapons and supplies, but not enough, because the attrition rate is appalling. Very few of them are making it back. And the Stalin refuses, his men, the Red Army, encamp on the far side, on the eastern side of Warsaw, and don't come in to help. And
they essentially watch it.
They watch it. They do. And the Poles can see them camped there doing nothing to help their allies. And Stalin even says that these incredibly brave air crews coming in from Britain, and then, of course, from Brindisi, from Italy, and, Brits, South Africans, a lot of Polish aircrew as well, they're not allowed to land on the far side of Warsaw in territory held by the Russian ally and refuel. So they have to take twice as much fuel with them. So they're flying petrol bombs. They can take half as much supplies. It's just such a betrayal. And so eventually they are forced to concede defeat. But then, I mean, because it's of no military significance, this city, the Germans know they're always going to pull back. Then they just go in and destroy
Just
the
raise it.
ruins of the city. They
Yeah,
raze it completely on Hitler's orders, and then they pull back. And then the Soviets come in and say, "Oh, we liberated Warsaw." It's all over by then.
mind-boggling.
But important to say, just before the end of the Warsaw Uprising, the new commander of the Home, the last one, unfortunately, has been executed by this point, Grotowicki. So now we have Komorowski, and he promotes his men in rank, and he awards medals. I mean, they don't actually have physical medals, but they record the promotions for later. And at this point, he says, yeah, he's seen these female sabotage groups going out and blowing up walls, and there are women assassination squads. They're doing a lot of the same stuff. And he says, yeah, you're absolutely right. And he signs the decree that Zoe has organised, meaning that the women, there are around 12,000 women that served in the Warsaw Uprising alone, are now legally recognised as soldiers under the Geneva Convention. So at the defeat, it's the only time in history that Nazi Germany sets up prisoner of war camps for women. And this saves many thousands of lives. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I want to say it was mentioned during the World at War series.
The old series.
Yeah, the old series where they actually talk about the Germans being quite moderate in how they treat the prisoners of war afterwards. In the back of their mind, how are they going to be treated
Yeah,
at the end of the
exactly.
war?
I mean, they're doing this because it's under the Geneva Convention now, and they're trying to say, look, we are a very valid, credible war force, just like you. We're just on other sides of this war. We obey all the rules as well. So it's good timing from that regard, because they know, a lot of them know they're going to be defeated. I mean, they're really being forced back now. So they're doing it partly to watch their own back, but they're also doing it because, now there's a reason telling them to do so, because it's signed into law. So and there are so many women who serve. They actually have to set up 2 prisoner of war camps for them all. So did really good work.
And Zoe at this time she is
Mm.
working at the tactical level, really. Like you said, she's
Yeah.
supplying, treating, moving equipment and supplies to the front lines. Where is she when this is happening, and how does it end? How does this action end for her, the Warsaw Uprising?
Yeah, so she's very angry not to be posted to the front line with a gun in hand herself. But in fact, very soon the Luftwaffe come over and the whole city's pretty much the front line. And she is serving. She has to move base quite a lot as the city, different forces take different parts of the city. So they have to move equipment. They've got all these caches of military material, but also, the importance of food. To keep an army fighting, and soon water as well, because the Germans destroy the water supply. So they have to dig wells, they have to have, they have containers, and they dig sort of lakes, really. Some of them initially as fire reserve and then become important. So she's doing like medical supplies. They managed to take one of the main breweries on the outskirts of Warsaw. So she organises getting all the grain, there's sugar there, of course, all of that sort of stuff, and they cook it and supply it. So she's doing all of that work under fire. There's a great story. One of many great stories is her. She runs to get water with a metal bucket, and they're part of this supply chain. And when she gets the other end of the line, she realises that she's absolutely soaked. And she's like, well, how could I be so clumsy and spill all that water? But she hasn't. Her bucket has been shot through. And so the water's just gone all over her. And that bucket probably saved her life. She's in the line of fire. But she keeps going. And then at the end of it, at the end of the uprising, she gets Komorowski, she's at headquarters, she gets him to sign this legal decree into law, which is so important. And of course, she could then have gone with her head held high with the other women going to be prisoners of war. But Komorowski actually gives her last orders. I won't go into the whole thing, but she keeps fighting all the way through the war. Yeah.
Right to the end in 45.
Yeah, she's one of the first to serve all the way through.
Yeah, mind-boggling to me that I'm a combat veteran. We had short tours compared to what these folks went through. By and large, many World War II veterans of all the Allied armies. But in the case of Poland, from September 39 all the way to 45, mid to late 45. It's
extraordinary, isn't it?
Just mind-boggling. Again, my grandfather has a Asia Pacific campaign medal with like 9 awards. These folks just went through all of these actions because it was till the end of the war. It was not There's not a, hey,
There's
take a
no
time
option,
out.
right?
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
no vacant, no holiday time, no
yeah.
downtime. So
And
yeah,
especially for the Poles because their home has been occupied.
mm,
So that it's
that's
either
right.
fight or die in
That's
this case
exactly right.
as a
That's it.
people.
Yeah, yeah,
But after the war, there's also an interesting anecdote that we talked about prior to coming on.
yeah.
What happens to her, which to me is again amazing and mind-boggling, as a
Mm,
hero of Poland, how she's
yeah.
treated after the war.
I mean, this is one of the great ironies of Zoe's story is, well, of course, you have to remember that we've just been celebrating this year, just passing now, VE Day, 80th anniversary. We think of bunting and tea parties and welcoming the men home, those that survived, and peace and freedom, right? That's what we're celebrating. In Poland, yes, there's a level of peace, but there is no freedom. They end the war with a Soviet-imposed communist regime. And the first thing that regime does is it extends the hand of welcome or, come and negotiate with us the transitional period to peace to the leaders of the Home Army. And so the leaders arrive cautiously. They're all arrested. They're sent to Moscow for a show trial. That's it. We don't see them again. Then the communist government rounds up the next level down, right? And eventually, the irony of Zoe's story is that she is so close to being arrested by the Gestapo, by the Germans throughout the war, but she always gets away. After the war, she's arrested by the communist government in 1951 on trumped-up charges because they fear she might help organise and support resistance against that regime. So trumped-up charges, and she's sentenced to 10 years in prison. This hero who had done so much for her nation. And she's tortured in prison for more information, for the names of others, and she never speaks, despite some horrific abuse. She is actually arrested after just 6 years, 4 years early after the death of Stalin. There's a bit of a thaw and so on. And one of the most extraordinary interviews I did during my research for this book was with a woman who had shared Zoe's prison cell. She was much younger than Zoe, and I managed to speak to her. Sadly, she passed away just very, very soon after that. And she said Zoe was sort of fighting in the prison as well. I mean, what she was doing was she was in a female prison with lots of young women who had missed, a generation had missed their education, 6 years with no education. So she was teaching them mathematics and teaching them to read. Some of them couldn't read. And but for all, she gave them a sense of self-worth because they had been put down. Suicide rates were very high. Women were drinking bleach and so on. It's just horrific. And she pulled them together and made them a self-respecting force of young women for the future. She's constantly, she never stops. She's fantastic.
She's giving all the way through her life,
Yeah,
essentially, giving to
yeah,
Poland, giving
absolutely.
to Poles. Just an amazing story. And I think a lot of folks, there's a lot of folks out there who love the special operations realm in terms of their
Yeah,
reading and their what they align themselves to in terms of their points of interest. And I think those folks will get a lot out of this. And I really appreciate
yeah,
how you've leaned into showing the women's contribution into World War II, because a lot of times, we think Rosie the Riveter or something of that nature,
yeah.
whereas
Which is important as well.
yes, but
Yeah,
Zoe is on the front lines and
yeah,
in operating in one of the most dangerous environments for most of her time. And I think a lot of people will really enjoy reading this story, especially all the little anecdotes that we talked about. Um, I will have the link for Agent Zoe and Claire's website if you want to go and check out some of her other books and maybe see what her event schedule looks like so you can go hear her talk in person. You were over in the
yeah.
States
That'd be great. Yeah,
last
I did.
year
Yeah,
at
I
the
did
Spy
2 trips.
Museum.
Yeah, I did. I did Washington DC and New York. I did, I think, 6 or 7 venues, which was fantastic. I loved it. Spy
Wonderful.
Museum was great fun. And then I've just got back. I was speaking at the annual World War II conference at the museum in New Orleans. What an incredible museum that is, and a great conference as well. So it was great to be out there again. Yeah.
Any new projects in the works?
Yes, I'm under contract for my next book, but too early to talk about that. I don't want to jinx it. But yeah, keep
Okay.
your eyes open. Yeah.
All right, we'll do. Is it same? Is it going to be the same topic
And
realm?
Only in the broadest sense. I mean, it is another woman in the Second World War, but I've tried with all of my books to take a very different view. So I've written about two women who served, the only two women who served as test pilots for the Third Reich, one of whom was a fanatical Nazi, but the other one was secretly in the resistance and actually tried to kill Hitler. Amazing. Only two women, you get the whole lot. And I've written about a woman who served Britain as a special agent, and this is the Polish story. So again, it's another very different story, but I think it's fascinating and important. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we'll keep our eyes open for any press releases coming.
It'll be a while
Clare,
yet.
this has been wonderful. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very
thanks
much for having me
everyone
on,
for
Joe.
checking in.
Cheers.
No, it's my pleasure.